Welcome to this episode of Unpixelated Talks. I'm your host, Jay Desai. We've all been in situations where we've looked at someone's title and thought, I wonder what that person does. And what value does that role really add? So in the series, I endeavor to explore the granular details of various roles and, of course, interact with the people behind the title. Also, we look at it from a perspective of how that title interacts with pre-sales as well. So, welcome. So, my guest today has been working in the channel space for more years than my entire IT career. I welcome Rob Evans. Rob has had a very long and adventurous career in IT across various organizations. His most recent title, Rob, is that of Channel Account Manager. In his career over 20 years, he has worked at Alcatel, Polycom, F5 Networks, and most recently, he is at Checkpoint Security. So welcome, Rob. As always, it is a pleasure to talk to you. With that, I pass the mic to you for your version of your introduction.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Haven't done too many of these sort of podcast interview style things, but yeah, really looking forward to the chat. So I guess, as you say, been working in channel now for a number of years. My background, I've come out of sort of being originally sort of a network engineer, working post-sales support back in the days of dial-up, showing how old I am, mate. But I've worked mainly for vendors, lived over in London a couple of years and worked for an end customer there as a network and security administrator. Spent many years working in unified comms. When I got back, more on the pre-sales side and a solution architect. So quite a lot of roles sort of on the technical side, and then eventually sort of fell into the channel account manager role and have sort of been doing that ever since. So yeah, it's been a bit of a journey, but here I am.
Great journey. So I think just on that note, could you explain the role of a channel account manager or a channel manager? What does your day look like?
Yeah, so I guess channel account management is a bit of a supporting sales role. So obviously it's in the sales team. Really, it revolves around sort of managing a set of channel partners. So many vendors, or a lot of vendors, especially overseas vendors, they run a sort of a tiered model for selling to the market. So they tend to have salespeople that talk directly to end customers, but end customers can't buy directly off the vendors. So they use, channel partners to provide additional scale and actually wrap services around the vendor's offerings and provide things like integration services, managed services, professional services. So my job is just essentially, I guess, looking after those partners, making sure they're enabled, making sure they understand our offerings, obviously doing quarterly business reviews, tracking deal registrations, making sure I'm doing marketing activities with them, doing channel events. So anything to do with helping grow the sales pipeline with my set of channel partners. Yeah.
So I think you mentioned the word partners there and channels there. So what exactly is the difference between a channel or a partner? And I'd throw in another word, a distributor there as well. And do you work with all of them?
Yeah. Well, I guess channel's just really a method that businesses use to sell their goods and services, right? So as I was mentioning, tech vendors tend to have a sort of an indirect sales channel approach. And often when you have an indirect approach, you can either have a one or a two tier sort of setup. A lot of vendors have a two-tier setup. I think especially if they're dealing with hardware, so they would have a distributor, which is sort of your wholesaler, and they can help obviously import the product and do freight forwarding and deal with like RMAs and returns, etc. And then under the distributor, you have obviously a set of channel partners, which are reseller or MSP partners that actually, take your goods, wrap their services around, and provide the whole solution to the end customer. So that's sort of how it works. But yeah, I do work with both of them. We do have a distribution manager who sort of more directly deals with the distributors and sort of the business plans and sort of helping them out. But they're still an integral part, I guess, of a channel manager's role, because they can obviously help you access new channel partners, new resellers, new MSP partners. They have their own set of relationships, and they can often field sort of a wider base of partners and help sort of get them sort of up to a certain level, where then after then they'll be handed over to be a directly managed partner by that vendor. So they're sort of dealing with obviously the much wider base of partners, and trying to sort of discover who's the next sort of prospect channel partner up and coming that we can work more closely with.
So for the audience members who are not familiar with the terms we use here, could you please tell me what MSP actually stands for?
Yep. MSP is a managed service provider. Yeah. So I guess what you've sort of got some partners that are more resellers, so they'll just take your products, they'll add their margin on and just resell those to the end customer. But you can also have a situation, especially a lot of telcos, for example, or other partners that might actually use your product and then just provide it as a service. So they might actually
so they'll have
ownership of it. Yeah, they might retain ownership of it and sell it more as a service to the end customers. They might even white label your kit, so people may not even know they're using Checkpoint, for example, or whatever vendor you represent, and it's just provided as a service, and it may even be branded as their own brand, so like a white label arrangement.
In that case, the licensing terms of the software provider reside with the MSP, and the end customer only deals directly with MSP. Would that be correct?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's pretty common, right? I mean, the nice thing about that MSP style arrangement is, typically it's quite a sticky solution for the end customer. So, those MSP partners can sometimes get a bit higher margin than just simply reselling something, because as you can imagine, they can make a unique service that's a bit more differentiated. Yeah.
Now, I think you've worked with both software companies and hardware companies. Now, I understand you mentioned it in your explanation earlier, the role of a distributor for specifically a hardware company. But what changes for the word distributors or partner based on the type of the product? Say, for example, you're dealing with software. Do you need to deal with disties? If you're dealing with hardware, do you need to deal with channel? How does that dynamic work?
Yeah, I mean, software definitely does change the game a bit. The role of the distributors, for example, becomes less about importing hardware and shipping it to site and dealing with RMAs. In a software land, I guess they're just often providing things like the FX changing. A lot of vendors obviously have their products in US dollars, so they obviously, often the distributor's still helping out with that. They can help out, obviously track subscriptions across multiple partners. There'll still be obviously an element of reporting and tracking when subscriptions are expiring and different things. But definitely the distributors sort of need to look at, I guess, how they provide more value in that software world. And a lot of it becomes around sort of automation and that reporting function and being able to sort of easily integrate into vendors' offerings in that space. So yeah, it definitely does change the game. I think some of the distributors are, spending a bit of time trying to get their own digital marketplace sorted out, and just trying to work out how they can add more value, because obviously they have to also compete with the the public cloud marketplaces who sort of have all that stuff very established. So there is some danger there that some of the traditional distributors might get bypassed. Yeah.
So one of the key learning for me there is that for the role of distributor in the software world would one be of managing the FX or the foreign exchange, because a lot of vendors or software companies are based in US. And when you consume that software, say, for example, in Australia, you'd have to convert that from USD into AUD, and they help with that, amongst a lot of other tasks they provide.
Yep.
Now,
yeah, that's right.
I have worked with a lot of channel managers in my career so far, and all the channel managers have three favorite words, and those three favorite words being partners, partners, and partners. What is your favorite word, Rob?
Commission, mate. No, just kidding. Yeah, I mean, I think obviously partners are key, right? If you're in a channel role, the partners are effectively my customer. So
Sorry, I'm still laughing at your answer of commissions,
but I mean, everyone's in sales to earn commission at the end of the day. Yeah, mate, yeah, it is about the partners. It's about the relationships, understanding their business, understanding how they can make money, right? It's like all sales, mate. It's a contact sport. So yeah, partners are definitely key for me.
Absolutely. And I think, in my opinion, partners are key to any business's success as well. Now, what are the challenges a channel account manager could face? And how do you prioritize the work items or the challenges you work with?
Yeah, the big one I find in channel management is just obviously gaining mind share. I mean, I'm working obviously for a security vendor these days, and security is a hot topic, which is great. But there's a million security vendors out there, so one of the challenges is just trying to gain mind share with the channel partners, because unlike direct sellers who are going out positioning your brand, the channel partners have a choice of which vendor to work with, which one to sort of include in, say, their MSP offerings, or which one they're going to include in their architecture or design or put forward for a customer. So getting that mind share is can be a bit of a challenge. And I guess the extension of that is, just relevancy with the wider channel organization. Depending on if you're not, say, one of the really large vendors, then you may not have access to dedicated alliance people at a channel partner. You may not get mind share with marketing resources at the channel partner. So, that limits your ability to sort of execute on, you have to try and think of other novel ways to execute on things like joint marketing or, engagement with customers or what have you. So yeah.
Combining the efforts. Now, talking about combining efforts, the next question I have for you is, what sort of scenarios would be touch point for pre-sales or solution architects of the world to interact with a partner account manager? And when would you reach out to, say, someone like a solution architect within org you work at, and how would you provide them direction?
Yeah.
Engagement, of course.
Yeah. So, I mean, when it comes to engaging with the channel partners, I guess, obviously the key sort of places I'm going to engage with typically is around the sellers, the sales people, and the sales management of the partner. But equally, obviously, there's pre-sales teams that are part of that wider sales team. So the pre-sales people at the partner are obviously a critical layer. Architects, obviously, that are part of that as well. They're often building those solutions. So I guess the touch points for the vendor pre-sales people is obviously those equivalent sort of roles at the partner, and really, I obviously try and engage with them at the management level, on the pre-sales side as well. and try and create those connections, and I'll look towards, our own pre-sales people to try and help introduce them into those, and help obviously organize some enablement and get them across, I guess, the vendor products and offerings. But yeah, it's a really critical one, actually, which I think is a bit overlooked, if I'm going to be honest. That pre-sales layer engagement. I think maybe I'm quite conscious of it because I spent a lot of time in pre-sales and know how important that role is in the world, mate. So yeah,
Pre-sales folks get dragged left, right, and center all the time.
they do. It's really hard, especially, not all vendors have, dedicated channel pre-sales people either. So,
True.
you're borrowing other pre-sales resources to be able to do some of that work. So yeah, it's a great role, but yeah, very critical as well. Yep.
Absolutely. Now, Rob, I'm going to try and rewind the clock a bit here. Could you please take the audience through on how and where your career started in IT?
Okay. If I want to go right back, it would probably be in about, I don't know, grade 4 or something like that. I remember playing with my primary school had a couple of computers. They just got them, and they were like Spectrum ZX80s, I remember. And I created this little ski game, and it was basically like, it was all text, right? So it was like dots or X's to make the track, and it would sort of randomly generate. I remember typing it all in BASIC or whatever it was. That's probably where it started. And then, yeah, just over time, we had a home computer eventually, which was like an Apple IIe, and my dad started bringing home sort of IBM compatibles of various sorts with, monster things with like floppy disks and everything. So that's probably where I got the interest. And then, yeah, when it finally came time to look around for a job, I took a graduate role in networking, in like IP networking, and I was lucky enough that the first place I worked, which was Alcatel, put me on some training courses and learn about IP networking and stuff, and it all sort of started from there, mate. Yeah.
LANs, WANs, and subnets.
Exactly. Yep.
But I'm
Exactly.
curious, your dad bringing home the first IBM for you, but was your father into technology as well?
Not really. His background sort of like an accountant.
Right.
So he was using
A
it more
lot
as
of
just a
accountants used.
tool. Yeah. But I was sort of fascinated by this thing. I was like, oh yeah, I could once I started to work out, I could make it do things with BASIC and that. At one point I was thinking maybe I'd become a programmer or something like that. But for work experience, I did some work experience for a friend when I was in school, and it turned me off programming because I was just in front of the computer. I had to translate something from like COBOL to Fortran or vice versa, and they just dumped these huge manuals on me and said, translate this program from one language to the other so they could run it on their mainframe or something. And I was just like, this is a nightmare. I came away like a zombie. I'm like, nah, coding's not for me. So
very quickly you figured out what you did not want to do in IT.
Exactly, mate. Exactly.
So I'm going to fast forward a bit there and ask you, what was your first job in IT, and what would you describe as the key takeaway from the very first job you had?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, so the first job was sort of providing escalation support, and it was back in the days of dial-up. So if you remember, like dial-up internet, dial VPN services,
T2, the modems.
exactly, remote workers, exactly. So I was sort of looking after not obviously, obviously there's dial-up problems, but I was representing the vendor with that all these modems, all these people dialed into, obviously. So on the service provider side, there was obviously a big bank of modems that everyone dialed into. So, but yeah, I think, some of the learnings from, me entering into the the field was, as I was saying, I think it's good if you can get into a larger company that support you with a bit of training in the field that you want to go into. Some companies offer sort of grad rotations and things. I know Telstra does that. And that gives, I guess, you a bit of exposure to different areas. I didn't have that in my company, but they did provide some formal training, which was great. And, put me in a team with obviously much more senior escalation engineers and people doing support. And you obviously learn a lot from those people. So obviously really good to network in. And I guess hopefully you can find a mentor. You can obviously request a mentor as well.
Right.
And normally most companies will sort of pair you up with someone as a bit of a mentor who's a bit more senior. And you just, it's that time where you're just trying to really learn as much as you can, right? Learn how the world works and learn how to, for me, it was about like, how do you troubleshoot things, process of elimination, being methodical and that whole thing. So learn a lot in those first few years.
Sounds like you've set the basics right for a perfect career to follow. Now,
yeah, I mean, it helps, mate. It helps if you've got that foundation. Yep.
Absolutely. So I'm sure you've seen the transition in the industry firsthand, all the way from mainframes to the virtual machines, the containers, distributed clouds, and most recently, the chat GPTs of the world. So when you were evolving, like just around the time of your first job and whatnot, what were the challenges in the traditional computing days which you faced?
Yeah, I mean, back in the days, I remember, things were a lot more constrained in terms of, RAM and disk size and stuff. So even simple things like I remember trying to get network drivers and mouse drivers to load properly into like PCs, and they had this stupid 640K limit, and it wouldn't, you had to sort of do some voodoo magic to get things actually to load. It just literally, if you didn't sort of configure it right, you'd load the mouse driver and all of a sudden your network drive wouldn't load or something like that because there wasn't enough RAM there to load it. So there was definitely some stuff like that. Obviously a lot more constrained with resources nowadays. There's endless disk space, endless cloud storage, endless RAM is so cheap. So it's a pretty different scenario. In the networking world, I remember, we used to have the coax cables that were all sort of bus sort of style network, and you would forget to put one little terminator on and the whole network would go down and stuff
The
like
disk
that.
drives.
Yeah, the old floppy disks, very again pretty constrained of what you could exactly fit on one of those if you got like a 360K or 360K floppy disk. Remember, you had to flip them over, right? Remember that? You had to flip them over to read
what I'm thinking of when I said the word disk drive, I was thinking in my head the word tape drives, and I've seen them in action. Clunky little things, those tape drives for backups.
The only time I used a tape drive, mate, was on my cousin's Commodore 64. It took forever to load games. I remember that.
So how, in your opinion, have the challenges evolved in the technology industry? And what do you think are the current challenges?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting stuff going on nowadays, right? Yeah, I mean, everyone's probably seen the chat GPT and OpenAI and that quick transition that, how long ago? It wasn't that long ago. No one was really talking about it. And all of a sudden there was a step change. All of a sudden it became, pretty a step change in its capability. And then all of a sudden everyone's talking about it everywhere and using it. And that's a pretty interesting thing. I guess from a security aspect, it's also a little bit scary because you've got something there that can obviously generate code, obviously, but also things like phishing emails. It's just going to make it so much easier for people that really don't necessarily have, a lot of smarts around computers or coding to be able to, unfortunately design, or design malware or send phishing emails or whatever it might be. So, I think that's a big factor. I think AI and machine learning, obviously on the defense side, is going to become much more prevalent. But also things like just, attack surface, the attack surface has changed a lot in cybersecurity as well. You've sort of moved from what was probably, if you remember the days where everyone just went to the office and they're just sitting behind a firewall and you've got sort of a pretty fixed perimeter, to obviously people running things in cloud, spinning up new things all the time, and workers obviously spending 3-4 days at home,
And some people forget to turn off things that spin up in cloud.
Well, exactly that as well, right? So it's it's just visibility of what you've got running is half your challenge, and making sure the guardrails are there. But I just think about, you can imagine the perimeters no longer. People are all over the place. People are working from mobile devices. There's BYOD trend here as well. So, this is also becoming your new battleground. I think a lot of people just think about, oh yeah, I've got my work laptop's all secure, so I'm good. And next thing you know, people are downloading files and doing everything on a mobile device, and they've completely forgotten about it. So it's I think
we
interesting.
Are continuously dropping digital crumbs every time your mobile phone connects to a new tower. Every time you move, you're dropping digital crumbs. So I think that is a real challenge. Well called out.
Yeah.
So I think with COVID and whatnot, we've all been in challenging and creative situations. But if I was to ask you about embarrassing or a funny incident which you can think of, probably at work or a work trip or your recent past, what would that be?
So I know you're not going to believe me. This wasn't actually me who did this, but I remember working at a company a while back. I won't get too detailed on it, but I remember seeing someone who worked there just head into a meeting room by himself, and I'm like, what is this guy doing? It's very strange. He's sort of in the meeting room for a while, then eventually he's come out, and he didn't appear to be on the phone or anything. I'm like, what is he doing? And then, a few minutes later, someone went to use the meeting room for their actual meeting. And what he'd done is he'd just gone in there, crop dusted in there.
Oh, no.
and then closed the door behind him and exited. And everyone was like, mate, you could have made it to the bathroom instead of just going to the nearest meeting room. So that was sort of a funny situation.
That is just
pretty wrong. Pretty wrong as well.
I'm sure a lot of us have been guilty as charged of doing that.
Hopefully not in the meeting room, mate.
Probably not in the meeting room, yes. So, Rob, if you were not a tech professional, what would you be?
Well, it's a tough one. I do like my tech, mate. I don't know. I think if I had endless money and wasn't in tech, there's a few few things I could do, like maybe
imagine you have endless money.
Maybe like a skiing instructor. Go somewhere nice and teach people to ski. That'd be fun. Or just a teacher in general. I think teaching. My sisters are teachers. I think that's an interesting profession. Teaching, I guess the next generation coming up. Maybe a small business owner. Maybe I'd go start a cafe somewhere and churn out coffees and stuff. That's sort of some things that come to mind, like something entrepreneurial maybe. Yeah.
Oh man, a lot. So if you weren't a tech professional, I'm sure you've already got it figured out. So there's a plethora of professions you could have chosen from. I would not have picked ski instructor as your first choice. So.
Ski instructor, yeah, might be a little bit harder once you've got the family in tow, mate. But yeah.
Sure. But so talking about teaching and instructing, what would your coaching be for young professionals who are listening to this and who want to start a career in IT? What would your guidance for them be like?
Yeah, I think just I guess have a look at who's got those good sort of formal grad programs.
Mhm.
What sort of companies offer, I guess, the flexibility.
You mentioned
Um,
rotation earlier.
Grad rotation's a big one. I think that really helps, gives you exposure to a bunch of different areas if you're not exactly sure what area of IT you want to be in, because it's obviously a huge, massively wide field. Um, but it's obviously good if you have a bit of an idea of what sort of grabs you in IT, like, or what doesn't grab you. Sometimes it's more
Mhm.
important to try and identify what doesn't grab you. I'd sort of worked out I didn't want to do coding, and I remember when I had that decision, I was saying, okay, I either go down maybe web design.
Mhm.
At that time, everyone was getting into building, obviously, the
HTML
websites.
and CSS and whatnot.
Yeah, I thought, oh, maybe that's it. A little bit like coding, but not quite as hardcore as like C programming or something. So I was thinking I'd go maybe web design or networking. Now I chose
Get your
networking
foot into IT.
just to get your foot in, yeah, sort of which sort of area. But yeah, now there's a lot of breadth, right? Cybersecurity is obviously a really big growing field. I mean, probably have a look at where the demand is for jobs, and have a look, I guess, where there's a shortage, and what you think is going to be sort of around for a while. Maybe don't go to be like a mainframe programmer or something. I mean, cloud and security are obviously really, really big growth areas that are sort of here to stay. Yeah, and then just try and identify a company that's going to sort of support you as a graduate, give you the training, and give you the flexibility to try a few different things if maybe the first thing's not ticking all the boxes for you. Yeah.
Perfect. Look, Rob, with that, I could keep talking to you for hours at a stretch, but we should come to an end. What I've done is I've included your LinkedIn details in the description for anyone wanting to get in touch with you, and you can please provide them some guidance and coaching. That'd be awesome. For
Sure.
the audience members listening to this podcast, please provide us your feedback on how we went. Was it really interesting? What more could we have added? What more embarrassing questions we could have asked Rob? And how could we do better? But until next time, thank you very much. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Joe.